Welcome guys, today we will discuss a dynamic flexibility warm-up for a professional soccer player. Two techniques that will be utilized include self-myofascial release through a foam roll and dynamic flexibility. For the first portion, we will utilize self-myofascial release through a foam roll, targeting the quadriceps, adductors, gastrocsoleus complex, hamstrings, and thoracic spine. Reps will include 1, sets 1 to 2, for every muscle group, tempo of a 30-second hold for myofascial trigger points, and a duration of 5 minutes. As we can see, the athlete is performing a self-myofascial release technique on the quadriceps muscle group, actively flexing and extending the knee to target certain areas that might be overactive. He then switches over to the left side to alleviate any myofascial restrictions that may impede performance. From here, the athlete will perform the SMR technique on the adductor group. And same, reps include 1, sets 1 to 2 for a 30-second hold down that overactive trigger point. The athlete now transitions onto the posterior chain of the lower extremity, targeting myofascial trigger points which may be located at the gastrocnemius and or soleus. For soccer players, restrictions at the gastrocnemius and or soleus may inhibit function at the ankle, which may then hinder the power output. And for that reason, a soccer player should ensure that their gastrocnemius and or soleus muscle is nice and loose, nice and relaxed, for them to produce explosive motions such as jumping, running, kicking, and multiplanar change of direction. The athlete will now target myofascial trigger points located at the hamstring group, gliding over the overactive area and holding for 30 seconds. In a study conducted by Askling, Tengvar, and Thorstensen in 2013, hamstring strains were identified as the most common type of soft tissue injury among elite soccer players. For that reason, a performance coach must ensure that their athletes perform SMR techniques on the hamstrings to reduce the likelihood of injury and thus enhance performance. When assessing the posture of your athlete, it is important to note any discrepancies at the vertebral column, such as a forward lean, a kyphotic curve, a lordotic curve, which may impede performance. As stated by Johnson and Grinstaff 2012, a lack of thoracic mobility may cause local and distal pathologies that can bring about joint dysfunction. For that reason, we selected the T-spine mobility exercise to enhance the mobility of the vertebral column. The thoracic spine exercise may require 5 to 10 reps of 1 to 2 sets, ensuring that the athlete reaches extension and flexion of the vertebral column in a proficient manner. We will now transition onto the dynamic flexibility portion of the warm-up, where we will implement sport-specific lower extremity motions to prepare an athlete for competition. Exercises were performed on both right and left lower extremity for 5 reps and 1 to 2 sets through a controlled tempo for a duration of 5 minutes. Cones were set up and covered a total of 5 yards. We get the ball rolling with the linear calf pump, where we engage and activate that gastrocsoleus complex to prepare the athlete for any explosive motions. From here, transitioning onto the forward lunge, where we can see that ankle, knee, and hip motions are still produced, while lengthening the quadriceps muscle group and getting a big opening of that lower extremity and lower chain. We continue to focus on that quadriceps muscle. With the quad stretch, we can see there's a calf pump involved and a tug on the contralateral side. Of equal importance, and to mention, this should be performed for 5 reps for 1 to 2 sets, 1 for the right and 1 for the left. As we wrap around, we're going to focus on the piriformis, where we take the knee, take it to the chest in an angular motion, really get that extensibility at the posterior chain for 5 reps, 1 to 2 sets, and this will particularly pertain to every exercise, basically. 1 to 2 sets of every exercise, 1 for the right, 1 for the left, for 5 reps. We continue to see that there's a hip hug here, focusing on activating that anterior chain, taking it through an active motion that in result lengthens the posterior chain. As we move on and wrap around that cone, we will start to perform hip extension through a diver exercise, which helps to lengthen that hamstring group. As mentioned before, hamstring injuries are predominant among professional soccer players and may bring about injuries. For that reason, we must do as much as we can to manage and or prevent hamstring strains among the professional soccer population. Such exercise may be useful as it is performed in the slow and controlled motion, which later on will prepare the athlete for more explosive motions. In similar nature, the reverse kick engages that posterior chain while lengthening the hamstring muscle group and also getting a little bit of that extensibility at the anterior chain, that hip flexor complex. From here, we continue to work that hip mobility by including hip openers, which target the hip adductors and really working on those muscles that will be needed for a game. As the athlete wraps around, he will produce hip closers that can mimic passing motions, a trapping motions, a volley motion, which involves an athlete receiving a ball midair and then passing it back. Once he wraps around that last cone, we begin the kicking sequence of the warm-up, where we begin the straight leg kick in mid-distance, not going full range yet, performing this as stated before for 5 reps, 1 to 2 sets per side. As he wraps around, he takes it full distance. Some of you may refer to these as Frankenstein kicks. As the athlete finishes up the straight leg kicks, he will transition onto the cross body kicks. As we can see here, he engages a mid-distance cross body kick, which may mimic a cross, a volley, a shot on goal, and typically those kicking motions involved in soccer. Wrapping around the cone, he continues the cross-body kick sequence by engaging a full range of motion and really lengthening that posterior chain of the lower extremity. Upon completion of the kicking sequence, we finish up with a light jog to the starting point, and once there, perform a lateral lunge to really open up that lower extremity while engaging ankle, knee, and hip mobility and extensibility of those muscles and really preparing an athlete for competition. He performs this for 5 reps, 1 set, and as he wraps around, goes into a forward reach and then extension, lengthening that posterior chain musculature and anterior chain musculature. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you guys found this video educational and will use some of the exercises provided among your warm-up protocols.